Most people are not afraid of your emotions. They are afraid of what happens when you finally gain control over them. Because an undisciplined Sophia Empath is predictable. They forgive too quickly, trust too easily, give too much, stay too long, and the world quietly learns how to benefit from that. But something changes the moment discipline enters the empath's life. Not motivation, discipline. Carl Jung believed that the greatest transformation does not happen when a person discovers new strengths. It happens when they stop obeying their unconscious patterns. And that is exactly what discipline begins destroying. The automatic apology, the automatic people-pleasing, the automatic need to explain, the automatic fear of disappointing others, one by one. Those patterns begin disappearing. At first, nobody notices. The Sophia Empath simply becomes quieter, more observant, less reactive. They stop responding immediately, stop chasing misunderstandings, stop trying to convince people of their intentions. And that silence confuses everyone, because people become accustomed to predictable versions of you. The version who always answers, always forgives, always returns, always sacrifices. But discipline quietly erases that version, not through anger, through consistency. People often believe discipline is about waking up early, working harder, building routines. But psychological discipline is something far more unsettling. It is the ability to refuse emotional impulses that once controlled your entire identity. To feel guilt and still protect your boundary. To feel lonely and still walk away from unhealthy people. To love someone and still refuse to tolerate repeated disrespect. That kind of discipline changes more than behavior. It changes power. People don't resent your weakness. They resent the possibility that you might outgrow the emotional patterns that once gave them access to you. And access begins disappearing. Without arguments, without revenge, without announcements, the Sophia Empath simply becomes unavailable to chaos, unavailable to manipulation, unavailable to emotional games they once confused with connection. That is when people begin saying something strange. You've changed. And for the first time, they are absolutely right, because the person they depended on no longer exists. The disciplined Sophia Empath has begun replacing them, and most people have no idea what happens next. The frightening thing about discipline is that it does not only change your life, it changes everyone's relationship with you. At first, the difference is almost invisible. The Sophia Empath still smiles, still listens, still understands. But something essential is gone. Unlimited access. Carl Jung believed that every unconscious pattern survives through repetition. Break the repetition, and the entire psychological dynamic begins collapsing. That is exactly what discipline does. The Sophia Empath no longer replies out of guilt, no longer apologizes for protecting their peace, no longer mistakes emotional urgency for emotional importance. And suddenly, people who once felt comfortable around them begin feeling strangely uncomfortable. Not because the empath became colder, because predictability disappeared. The family member who once controlled them through disappointment no longer gets the same reaction. The friend who survived on endless second chances finds there are no more excuses. The partner who depended on emotional chaos finds only quiet boundaries waiting instead. Different people, same confusion. Because discipline removes emotional leverage, people often believe they miss the old you. But look closer. Do they miss you? Or do they miss the version of you they could influence? There is a difference, a dangerous difference. The disciplined Sophia Empath begins noticing something remarkable. The moment they stop explaining every decision, people begin creating stories on their behalf. You're becoming selfish. You think you're better than everyone. You've lost your kindness. But discipline often looks like arrogance to people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Kindness without boundaries quietly teaches people how to use you. Discipline quietly teaches them they no longer can. That shift creates resistance, not because discipline is wrong, because it exposes unhealthy expectations. The Sophia Empath no longer feels responsible for everyone's emotional comfort. They stop fixing problems they did not create, stop carrying burdens they did not choose, stop negotiating with behavior that repeatedly destroys trust. And with every quiet decision, their identity changes. Not loudly, almost invisibly, until one day they realize something that once seemed impossible. Peace no longer feels unfamiliar. Chaos does. And once peace becomes familiar, there are certain people who can no longer follow you there. And then discipline begins doing something even more unsettling. It changes what the Sophia Empath notices, not because the world changes, because their attention changes. For years, their mind was trained to search for pain, to understand it, to heal it, to carry it. But discipline quietly redirects that attention. Instead of asking, why are they behaving this way? The Sophia Empath begins asking, why am I still giving this behavior access to my life? That single question changes everything. Carl Jung believed that psychological maturity begins the moment energy stops flowing outward and starts returning inward. The disciplined Sophia Empath finally experiences this shift. They stop obsessing over other people's intentions and start observing their own unconscious habits. The habit of over-explaining, the habit of rescuing, the habit of feeling guilty whenever someone becomes disappointed, the habit of confusing empathy with responsibility. One by one, those habits begin dying, and something stronger replaces them. Discernment, not judgment. Discernment, because judgment reacts. Discernment observes. That difference is subtle, but it transforms every relationship. The Sophia Empath no longer feels obligated to solve every conflict, no longer believes every misunderstanding requires an explanation, no longer mistakes emotional intensity for emotional depth. People who once demanded immediate access now receive silence. People who once expected endless patience now meet calm boundaries. People who once controlled conversations through guilt discover that guilt no longer opens the same doors. And that is terrifying, not for the empath, for the people who depended on their old patterns. Most people don't fear your discipline. They fear what your discipline removes: access, influence, predictability. Because disciplined people become difficult to manipulate, not because they stop feeling, because they stop obeying every feeling. The Sophia Empath still experiences sadness, still experiences compassion, still experiences love, but those emotions no longer make decisions. Values do, self-respect does, reality does. And once emotions stop driving every choice, life becomes strangely quiet, not empty. Quiet. The kind of quiet that only appears when your inner world is no longer at war with itself. That silence is powerful, because in silence you finally hear something that emotional chaos kept drowning out. Your own mind, your own truth, your own direction. And once the Sophia Empath begins trusting that voice, the world around them starts responding in ways they never expected. And that is when the Sophia Empath discovers the real purpose of discipline. It was never about becoming harder. It was about becoming impossible to control. Most people imagine discipline as forcing yourself to do difficult things. Wake up earlier, work harder, stay consistent. But psychological discipline is far more unsettling. It is the ability to remain loyal to reality, even when your emotions beg you to escape it. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always seeks what feels familiar, not what is healthy. That is why people repeat the same relationships, the same arguments, the same emotional wounds, because familiarity feels like safety. The disciplined Sophia Empath finally breaks that cycle. For the first time, they stop confusing familiarity with love. Just because someone has always been in your life does not mean they deserve to remain there. Just because a pattern feels normal does not mean it is healthy. That realization feels brutal because it forces the empath to grieve people who are still alive, not because those people disappeared, because the illusion finally did. People often think discipline removes emotion. It doesn't. It removes emotional slavery. The Sophia Empath still feels compassion, still feels disappointment, still feels sadness, but those feelings no longer become commands. They become information. And information is very different from obedience. That is why discipline quietly changes every decision. The message that once demanded an immediate reply waits. The apology that once came automatically never arrives. The invitation that once felt impossible to refuse is declined without guilt. Small moments, massive transformation, because identity is never rebuilt through dramatic events. It is rebuilt through repeated choices. People reveal themselves through repetition, and so do you. The disciplined Sophia Empath begins noticing another disturbing pattern. The healthier they become, the fewer people celebrate it. Some grow distant, some become sarcastic. Some quietly hope the old version returns, not because the old version was happier, because the old version was easier to influence. People don't always miss who you were. Sometimes they miss the access they lost. And that realization changes how the Sophia Empath sees human nature forever. Because for the first time, they stop asking who truly loves them and start asking a far more uncomfortable question. Who still feels comfortable around me? Now that I no longer abandon myself, that question becomes the beginning of every relationship worth keeping. And eventually, the discipline becomes visible, not in the Sophia Empath's words, in their absence. They stop explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. Stop defending boundaries that have already been made clear. Stop chasing closure from those who benefit from keeping wounds open. Carl Jung believed that the strongest transformations happen quietly because real change rarely needs an audience. The disciplined Sophia Empath begins living this truth. Their routines become private, their healing becomes private, their goals become private, their peace becomes private. Not because they fear judgment, because they no longer seek permission. That silence unsettles people, especially those who once measured the empath's worth through accessibility. The phone calls become fewer, the emotional debates disappear, the endless explanations come to an end, and people begin asking strange questions. Why are you so distant? Why don't you tell me anything anymore? You used to trust me, but trust was never the real issue. Access was. The Sophia Empath simply stopped confusing transparency with obligation. Not everyone deserves to know what is happening inside you. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your healing. Some people gather information, not to understand you, but to predict you, to influence you, to keep you emotionally familiar. Discipline quietly removes that possibility. People often think strength is loud. It isn't. Real strength is becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation while remaining emotionally available to truth. That is much harder, because truth is uncomfortable. Truth says some relationships only survived because you abandoned yourself. Truth says some people loved your availability more than your presence. Truth says your constant forgiveness was interpreted as permanent permission. That realization is painful, but pain seen clearly becomes wisdom. Pain ignored becomes repetition. The disciplined Sophia Empath chooses wisdom again and again, until one day Their peace becomes stronger than their fear of losing people. And something remarkable happens. The people who once drained them no longer recognize them. Not because the empath became someone else, because they finally became themselves. And for some people, your authentic self is the one version of you they never wanted to meet. And then, discipline reaches its final test, not when life becomes peaceful, but when chaos returns. Because chaos always returns. A disrespectful message, an unexpected betrayal, an old relationship asking for another chance, the same emotional patterns, wearing different faces. The difference is, the Sophia Empath no longer responds the same way. Carl Jung believed that true transformation is proven the moment the unconscious pattern no longer controls your behavior. That moment finally arrives. The empath feels the guilt, but does not surrender to it. Feels the sadness, but does not chase what already ended. Feels compassion, but no longer confuses compassion with permission. That is psychological discipline, not the absence of emotion, the mastery of it. People often believe discipline makes a person less human. The opposite is true. Discipline frees you from becoming a prisoner of every passing emotion. The Sophia Empath begins noticing something extraordinary. The situations remain familiar. The emotional pressure remains familiar. The manipulation remains familiar, but their response is completely different. And that is where real power lives, not in controlling other people, in refusing to let other people control the version of you they preferred. People don't fear disciplined individuals because they are stronger. They fear them because they become predictable only to themselves, not to anyone else. The family member who once controlled you through guilt finds silence instead. The friend who survived on endless chances finds accountability instead. The partner who expected emotional reactions finds emotional stability instead. Different situations, same outcome, access denied, and for many people, that feels like rejection. But it isn't. It is reality. Because discipline eventually teaches the Sophia Empath something almost nobody understands. You are not responsible for becoming smaller so other people can remain comfortable. You are not responsible for carrying emotional burdens that belong to someone else. And you are certainly not responsible for sacrificing your peace to preserve unhealthy relationships. That version of you is gone, not because you became cold, because you finally became conscious. And consciousness changes everything. Because once the Sophia Empath becomes disciplined enough to master themselves, they become something the world rarely encounters. A person who cannot be manipulated through fear, cannot be controlled through guilt, cannot be distracted by emotional chaos. And there are few things more unsettling than someone who has finally learned to belong to themselves. And perhaps this is the moment people become truly afraid of the disciplined Sophia Empath, not because they became powerful, because they became internally free. Freedom is dangerous, especially to people who unconsciously depend on controlling others. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, a hidden part of the personality that seeks comfort, certainty, and control. Most people spend their lives negotiating with that shadow. The disciplined Sophia Empath does something different. They confront it, not once, every day, every time they choose consistency over impulse, truth over comfort, reality over fantasy. They weaken the unconscious patterns that once ruled their lives, and that transformation cannot remain invisible. People begin noticing something they cannot explain. The empath no longer reacts to provocation, no longer argues with misunderstanding, no longer chases people who choose distance, no longer begs to be chosen. Not because they stopped caring, because they stopped abandoning themselves. That distinction changes everything. People often confuse emotional independence with emotional coldness. They are not the same. Coldness closes the heart. Discipline protects it. The Sophia Empath still loves deeply, still forgives, still feels compassion. But compassion no longer overrides wisdom. Love no longer overrides self-respect. Hope no longer overrides evidence. And evidence has become their greatest teacher. People reveal themselves through repetition, not promises, not intentions. Repetition. The disciplined Sophia Empath finally believes what they repeatedly see, not what they desperately wish were true. That single shift ends years of unnecessary suffering, because suffering often survives where reality is denied. Once reality is accepted, many forms of pain quietly disappear. The need to convince disappears. The need to rescue disappears. The need to be understood by everyone disappears. And in that silence, a different kind of strength emerges. Not the strength to control the world, the strength to remain unchanged by it. The Sophia Empath finally understands that discipline was never about creating a perfect life. It was about creating a mind that cannot be easily disturbed by imperfect people. And once that mind exists, there are very few things left that the outside world can take from you. Because the greatest form of discipline is not mastering your schedule. It is mastering yourself. And in the end, people were never frightened by the Sophia Empath's discipline. They were frightened by what that discipline revealed. That is the final realization. The quiet one. The one that changes everything. Because throughout life, the Sophia Empath believed their greatest gift was empathy, their ability to understand, to forgive, to remain patient, to keep seeing the good in people long after everyone else had stopped. But discipline exposes a deeper truth. Empathy is not your greatest strength, self-mastery is. Carl Jung believed that the highest form of psychological development is not controlling other people. It is integrating the parts of yourself that once controlled you. The fear of rejection, the need for approval, the addiction to being needed, the unconscious belief that your worth depends on how much you sacrifice. One by one, those parts lose their authority, not because they disappear, because they are finally seen. And what is fully seen can no longer rule you from the shadows. That is when the Sophia Empath becomes truly different. Not louder, quieter, not harsher, clearer, not emotionless, unshakable. People begin calling them distant. But distance was never the goal. Freedom was. Freedom from guilt that never belonged to them. Freedom from relationships that survived only through self-abandonment. Freedom from emotional patterns disguised as destiny. Most people spend their entire lives mastering careers, mastering money, mastering influence. Very few ever master themselves. And perhaps that is why genuine discipline feels so intimidating. Because it cannot be manipulated, it cannot be rushed, it cannot be borrowed. It must be earned through thousands of invisible decisions nobody applauds. The decision to remain silent when chaos demands a reaction. The decision to leave when your heart begs you to stay. The decision to trust patterns instead of promises. The decision to protect your peace without feeling guilty for it. That is the discipline that changes a life. And perhaps the coldest truth about human nature is this. The moment you stop needing people to complete you, the people who benefited from your incompleteness begin disappearing. Not because you rejected them, because they could no longer recognize the person standing in front of them. The disciplined Sophia Empath no longer belongs to fear, no longer belongs to manipulation, no longer belongs to the expectations of others. They belong to themselves. And there are very few things more unsettling than a human being who has finally become impossible to control. Because the rarest form of power is not the power to rule others. It is the quiet power of never allowing your unconscious to rule you again.